like to thank Steve Millard from CNY Concrete Countertops who assisted us with this project. In this video, we will be featuring Buddy Rhodes Vertical mix for the stone base, ECC for the live edge wood slab, as well as a few mold rubber materials for recreating the wood edge details. We start by constructing a box out of cabinet grade plywood and 2x4s. This will be the core of the upper base section. EPS foam is cut with a hot wire saw. These pieces are used to add a regular shape to the base. We use long screws to attach the foam to the box temporarily. Tar paper is stapled to all plywood surfaces to make it water resistant. Expanded wire lath is mechanically attached with staples and screws. Wire lath can easily be cut with an angle grinder. While wrapping the entire box, be sure to encapsulate the foam. Wire lath will ensure proper mechanical adhesion of the Buddy Rhodes Vertical mix. For the lower base section, we stacked foam boards to build the structure off of. These may be removed or left in place after the vertical mix has set. The entire foam area is wrapped with wire lath. We used cable ties to connect lath sections together. Trim the ends to eliminate the chance they protrude through the concrete. Since this project will be temporarily exhibited and shipped all over, we decided to use a base scratch coat. This will provide more structural integrity to the rock base. We started by adding the prescribed water and ramp to the mixing vessel, followed by the dry vertical mix and blend well. Sides are scraped to ensure all dry material is incorporated and continue to blend well. By hand, we worked the material into the wire lath and spread to a uniform thickness over the wire lath. This should be approximately 1/2 inch thick. Continue until all the surfaces are covered. We used a pull trowel to help cover the larger flat areas and to work the material into some irregular areas. While the material is still in its plastic state, we comb it with a scarifier or rake. This will provide excellent mechanical adhesion of the texture layer. We followed the same procedure on the upper base section, working the material into the lath while leaving approximately 1/2 inch over the top of the lath. The next day, using a drywall knife, we scraped any loose or jagged material from the hardened scratch coat. We then mixed ramp with water 50-50 and sprayed onto the surface. This will pre-wet the scratch coat, allowing proper adhesion. This is also important to not let the texture coat flash set, which could cause a weak bond. A chip brush ensures the texture becomes properly wet as well as distributing puddled areas. Be careful not to apply fresh vertical mix to standing puddles of the ramp primer, as this may dilute the material, reducing its strength. We mixed more vertical mix following the same procedures and immediately applied it to the damp scratch coat. We continued to apply enough material until a derby was used to distribute over the surface. We sprayed a melamine board with stamp and roller release and positioned it on the surface to create a level area for the upper base section to be seated. We carefully removed the board while sliding, so we would not remove the vertical mix. We continued applying the material until all areas were covered. Then, while the concrete is still in its plastic state, we used a trowel sprayed with stamp and roller release to remove hand and tool marks and to create irregular rock shapes. We used a mason brush that was sprayed with stamp and roller release to create rock texture over the surface. followed by other various brushes to stipple away application marks, leaving organic rock-like textures. The same process was followed for the upper base section: spray ramp primer, apply vertical mix, spread, smooth, and texture. In this indoor environment, we were able to start carving after 3.5 hours. Various tools and techniques were used to cut and scrape our project to life. The next day we started coloring the project with Buddy Rhodes Glazes. We mixed multiple colors, creating our various color combinations for our envisioned rock base. Through spraying and dabbing, we applied the colors in layers. Water was used as a vehicle for distributing the color in an organic fashion. We quickly removed drips and runs with a sponge or flood of water spray. We placed the two sections together to add continuity through final color applications. Lastly, we used a 50 grit diamond hand pad to scuff the high points, adding weathered details. For the countertop, we will use two existing VitaFlex 30 live edge molds for the sidewalls, so we chose a similar thickness wood slab to make the end grain molds. We prepared the slab by clamping a section of plywood that will act as our work surface. Sonite wax is used to seal the wood, which will minimize mechanical attachment. We will use fast-setting silicone putty to make the end grain molds. Smooth-on silicone Pollo Putty 40 is dispensed at a ratio of 100:6 by weight. The materials are mixed by hand until uniform in color. There is a 3 to 5 minute pot life, so we must work quickly. We press the putty onto the surface, making sure to work out any air and be sure to have 100% contact. We press the strip of plywood into the backside to have an even registration to secure to the formed surface. Since the board was not as wide as our project, we made sections and pieced them together while the new material was pliable. The end result were end grain molds larger than needed for our project. After 30 minutes, the molds were ready for use. The silicone mold has captured all the wood texture that will be transferred to the concrete. We laid all of our molds out on a melamine base. We used plasticine clay where they intersect if necessary to smooth this transition. Extruded foam board was cut with a hot wire knife to create an irregular shaped void in the center pith area of the slab. Spray adhesive is used to secure the foam to the form base. This is where the faux fire will travel through. A smaller piece of foam is used to add to a check on the end grain mold, which represents where the wood has split. The form base is cleaned of any residual adhesive with denatured alcohol. Screws are used to secure the VitaFlex rubber side molds since they are wide enough to do so. The end grain molds needed additional support, so we used plywood strips to attach them. We added blocking that was hot glued in place for extra support, and the Pollo Putty molds were pin nailed into the wood. We sprayed Aquacon over all surfaces to allow the concrete to release while demolding. Since this was a relatively small project, we chose not to use our concrete mixer and to mix 2 batches in our mixing tubs. All of the components are weighed out. We used a 1% load of sesame pigment to give the piece a base wood tone and added this to the chilled water and water reducer 420. ECC Blended mix is gradually added and blended well. We followed the flowable recipe found in the Buddy Rhodes catalog to cast this project. We also added PVA 100 fibers to provide more body, minimizing the chance of segregation in fluid mixes. We poured the concrete to the top of the foam void in the form. We vibrated the form while working the material to all corners. Then we placed a foam knockout in the backside, registering off the added insert, creating a void which will lighten the project. The foam is kept from floating with the weight of a concrete tile. The second batch of concrete is mixed and placed and filled the remainder of the way. The new mix is massaged along the edges to help remove entrapped air and reduce the chance of a casting line between the 2 mixes. Once the concrete is firm, it is covered with plastic to keep water from escaping, and packing blankets to trap the heat from its exotherm. The next day, the blankets and plastic are removed and the piece is ready to be demolded. First, the foam knockout is removed. We start removing from a pre-scored mark in the panel because it will be easier to break at this point. Then we unscrewed the edges and plywood supports and stripped the rubber, revealing all of the captured details. The countertop is transferred to a processing cart and flipped right side up. The center foam knockout is carefully removed. The surface is processed wet with a pneumatic 200 grit diamond orbital polishing pad. After inspecting the surface, it was decided more profile was needed because of the post-coloring treatment. We acid etched with a 10:1 solution of muriatic acid while scrubbing with a scouring pad to provide suitable profile. When finished, we rinsed well with water, squeegeed off, and wiped it dry with a clean towel. Using a torch, we removed visible fibers from the bottom edge. We rounded over all sharp edges with a diamond hand polishing pad. We used Buddy Rhodes Glazes to color the concrete and started by wetting the piece with water. We then sprayed various colors and followed with various techniques to create the effects achieved. Custom blends of colors were used for different areas. Glazes were allowed to dry, and the concrete was cured for 7 days before sealing. Buddy Rhodes RPS matte sealer was used to seal the countertop. We applied 2 prime applications according to the technical instructions with a high density foam roller. A chip brush was used to cover the edges and wood bark textures. Between the primer and finish applications, the sealer is allowed to dry for 3 hours. This was followed by 2 final applications, which were applied according to technical instructions with a high-density foam roller. We assembled the 2 components of the base and inserted the components of the faux fire generator. The countertop was set into place, completing the project.